Which way, young man? Hi, I'm Mike Mason. This is the Immortal Combat Podcast. The Immortal Combat Podcast is a podcast arm of Very Christie. Very Christie is a Catholic lay apostolate devoted to help men attain the full stature of Christ by growing strong in mind, body, and spirit. If you'd like to learn more about our work, you can check us out online at verychristie.com and stjosephsociety.org. All right, gentlemen, happy Friday to you guys. I hope you guys are doing well. I'm hoping my power doesn't go out. We have some pretty righteous thunderstorms rolling through town, second night in a row. Had tornado sirens again a little bit last night, but no big deal. But hopefully this doesn't cut out midstream. But anyways, today what I want to pass on some thoughts to you guys is I was invited to our local Catholic high school here in town to talk to actually the middle school eighth grade boys to kind of get the conversation rolling on issues of chastity and growing up and stuff like that. And they were a great group of guys. I'd never met them before. I mean, I've seen them around town a little bit, but never met them. And one thing I've always surprised by, not surprised, pleasantly surprised by, every time I talk to young men, whether they're students I had in class or guest speaking like I did now, when you challenge them to have an adult conversation, because I always tell them, I said, you guys are not boys anymore, you're young men. We're going to talk about serious and important topics, and I expect you guys to conduct yourself like young men. It never ceases to amaze me, and it probably shouldn't surprise me at this point anymore, but that they always rise to that occasion. I think a lot of people interact with teenagers. There's plenty to be pessimistic about in contemporary culture with youth culture, but I've always been very pleasantly surprised by just the mature and good conversations we have. The fact they listen, they pay attention, they're thinking about it. It's always been a really good thing. But what I was thinking, just to pass on to you guys, is to just pass on a couple thoughts that I shared with them, just for your consideration. And the way I structured the talk is we talked about what is purity, and then what is chastity, and then I talked about the virtues of a good man. Okay, and the idea is we didn't get into like the nitty gritty of chastity because they're eighth graders. Most of them have probably heard this before, some of them maybe not, and you don't need to get in the nitty gritty yet. And plus, the angle I wanted to take on this was what is life about for the next 10 years for them? And I told them, I said, you guys are no longer boys, right? You're transitioning into manhood. And for the next 10 years, this really the next 10 years, a training ground to be a man. A real strong conviction I have that we need to reclaim as Catholic men in our society is to give the young men an apprenticeship and authentic Catholic masculinity. That's really what Very Christie is. Okay, St. Joe Society is we partner with parish priests to help raise disciples of the men in their parish, help them be good fathers and husbands, and so on and so forth. And really, Very Christie came out of the demand of many of those men who wanted something to pass on to their sons. And so young men need spiritual apprenticeship. Okay. We older guys need some apprenticeship as well. Okay. St. Joe Society, but really to pass this on to the next generation. And these guys are hungry for this sort of thing. And what Very Christie is it's where guys who are in the community of Catholic men, right? This community here, to try to train these young men to acquire the virtues necessary to be welcomed into our community. One of the things I said to these guys, I said, listen, in our town here, 10 or 15 years, I want to be able to welcome you guys into the good, strong, wise Catholic men in our community. That these guys will be prepared to take on that mantle of leadership by having a wife, having children, being good members of our parish and our community, but they need to train for that. Maybe some of them will be called to the priesthood, but guys need training. We need to reclaim adolescence. It's not a period to just screw off and be ridiculous and postpone growing up. We need to reclaim it as a training ground. And what I told the guys at the end, like a lot of the training you'll do are things you guys like anyhow, right? Playing sports, going to school, the training ground of socializing is partially a training ground, right? They need to learn to socialize in healthy and productive ways, things like that. I learn to play musical instruments, be in clubs. There's a lot of really fun and enjoyable ways for them to build character and a skill set so that we can welcome it into, a really authentic Catholic masculinity. So we talked the first part just about what purity is. And the way I define purity for them is that God has a plan for us. He has a place he wants to take us, right? Jesus said in John 10:10, I've come to bring you life and life to the fullest. God has a plan to make us saintly and strong and good and noble. Impurity is anything that conflicts with that. Okay. So when Jesus says, blessed are the poor, for they shall see God, Purity, impurity takes away our ability to become the men we want to be, to become saints, to see God in heaven. And so when we're getting through impurity, a lot of times we focus on things with the sixth and ninth commandment, which is certainly part of what our Lord has in mind, but it can include lots of things. Okay. It can include for these guys, video games, online activity, pornography, alcohol, drugs, cell phones, stuff like that. We need to help these guys get a vision for living a good and pure life. A lot of young men think purity, living a pure life, is some sort of weakness or they have to sacrifice a good and adventurous life when the exact opposite's true. St. Thomas Aquinas said, men cannot live without joy. Therefore, when man is deprived of true spiritual joys, he becomes addicted to carnal pleasures. Guys, impurities, guys who get involved in impurities, drugs, alcohol, sex, pornography, video games, they're trying to fill a void in their soul that's only meant to be filled by God. These guys need a vision of what life's about and where they're going. They need inspiration and a vision. And they need guys like you, if you're one of the older guys listening to this, to come alongside them and help lead them to that. Okay. Because young men are hungry for this. We've seen the statistics over the last couple years, but especially this year, lots of young men, 20 to 40-year-olds, coming in to be into the Eastern Orthodox Church and the Catholic Church. They want tradition, they want rootedness. Every time I talk to young people, I worked with them for 20 years, I still work with them now. Every time I challenge them to something more, they're hungry for this stuff. And that's why I created Very Christy, is to give them an outlet to understand that. But we need to be able to articulate this to them, inspire them, um, lead them, model that behavior for them so these guys have an idea of where they're headed. Um, in his book, Back to Virtue, Peter Kraft has this great quote. He says this: our lives are a process of growing the necessary organs for our destiny. That is the reason why God is such a stickler about morality. Not because he wants to control our behavior, but because he wants us to become the kind of people who can see him and thus experience infinite joy. Morality, and you have to impress this upon these young people, morality is not a list of do's and don'ts, rights, wrongs, stuff like that. What morality is trying to give a young man a good and happy life, to make him strong and wise and noble and holy. Morality is there to keep us from those things which will destroy us and move us towards those things that will build us up and make us in the men we want us to be. And when you can paint a vision for a young man that manliness, virtue, holiness, that these are strengths, these something is alive in them that they want that. And these guys vigorously nodded their heads that they do want to be men when they're older that are just what I described to you. Okay. And they even can see the hypocrisy that when you paint a picture of what a bad man is, they don't want that. Okay. And so the difficulty we have to help them do is see that the things in the here and now that seem like they're not a big deal, or even if they're a big deal, a guy doesn't see the fact that these sins, small or large, are really ruining his soul. We have to help them understand that, okay, and guide them to it. And then build boundaries for them as well. This is really a talk I gave to them that probably need to meet with the fathers in the future. And there's plans at our school to do that, to get the parents in there to help them understand that we need to build some boundaries around these young people. We need to instill in them good moral principles, good principles of behavior. And then we need to create some spaces for them to be kids, to have fun, but in ways that they won't regret. But those are some thoughts I want to pass on to you guys. The last thing I'll pass on, and then we'll call it quits for today, is I wrote down 10 virtues of a good man. We actually, in our discussion, didn't get to this. We spent a whole hour kind of fielding questions and talking about chastity and such. But I want to throw these out to you, and you guys see what you guys think. Maybe you agree with them, disagree. Maybe you'd want to add some others. But I'll just read through them real quick. The first one's this: what is a good man? A good man is willing to give his life to protect others. That's number one. Number two, a good man is task oriented. He lets his actions speak for themselves. So we aren't all talk, we're men of actions and deeds. Number three, a man does his duty even when it's unappreciated. A good man is a man of honor who is loyal to others and to his principles. Number five, A man, a good man, is rooted in discipline and strength. 6, a good man is tender and compassionate, but never soft. That was actually when I kept coming back to with them is that because none of these guys want to be soft. And I said, when you chase impurities, when you sin, it makes you soft physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. None of us want to be soft. We want to be effeminate. Guys, good men are strong. Okay. But our strength shines through our tenderness and compassion, particularly with people that are weaker than us. Okay. So we're not brutes. Number 7, a good man sees himself as part of a unit, a band of brothers greater than himself. This is one of the primary reasons I established St. Joe's Society in Via Christi is to give men a band of brothers. We can't float through this life by ourselves. If I'm trying to live a good and decent Christian life in this awful culture that we're currently in, you need a band of brothers to do that. And I'm very grateful. I have good friends and a good community here in town, even this new town where I moved, starting to establish some good friendships with good men. We need to bind guys together. And these young men need that. Okay. They need that support. Number 8, a good man follows the chain of command without considering it demeaning. We need to show guys that obedience is the pathway to the good life. Obedience is a sign of strength, not weakness. We live in a culture that's lots of liberalism. I don't mean political, I mean freedom of the will. Okay, everybody wants to do it their way. Nah, obedience. Number 9, he is courageous, even and especially when heroism is required. And 10, he sees sacrifice as an opportunity to show his character and demonstrate love. So, those were 10 things I wrote down of virtues of a good man. So, I'm probably going to cut it off there for you guys. Feel free if you'd like in your comments. Been trying to be good about checking those to drop some in there. That'd be great. Also, like, subscribe, pass this on to guys who might need it. But guys, encourage men, invite men into your St. Joe Society groups, build those up. I know we're coming to a close of another year here. We'll start, ratchet back up. Some of you guys meet over the summer. Some will ratchet back up in September. Invite some guys in. Guys need a band of brothers to grow in holiness. And consider partnering with us with Via Christi. It works really well with a group of dads discipling their sons. It'll work well in that context. We're pushing to get it in more schools as well. Okay. So be praying for that. And certainly think of us if you have some ideas. But all right, I'm going to wrap it up there, a little over the 12-minute mark. I hope you guys have a blessed weekend. And I will look forward to talking to you next time. God bless.